My name is Mariana Perez, and I'm a Park Interpreter Specialist for California State Parks. And currently, I am at Morro Bay, and we're looking at the estuary behind me. I'm just going to give a few minutes before we begin so you guys have time to gather material for an activity that we'll be doing later on this program. You will need a piece of paper, 2 washable markers of different colors. You'll need tape and a hard surface, and that could be a piece of cardboard, it could be your kitchen countertop, a desk, your dining room table, whichever you think fits. And you'll also need a spray bottle filled with water. Now, if you don't have a spray bottle, that is perfectly okay. You can just fill up a cup with a little bit of water, and that will work perfectly for this activity. So here in Morro Bay, it's cloudy. It's a little bit chilly, but still a beautiful day. And behind me, you're looking at the Morro Bay Estuary, the salt marsh community of the estuary. And again, I'm just going to give a few more seconds to see if anyone else will join us today for our Coast to Couch webinar. All right. Now, before we get started, if you guys have any questions throughout the program, please feel free to use the Q&A box and leave your comments. You can also message us at Morro Bay State Parks Facebook. You can do that during this program or after the program if you're unable to use the Q&A box. And you can also use the hashtag Coast to Couch to reach us. So again, my name is Mariana Perez, and I'm a Park Interpreter Specialist for California State Parks. And you guys are watching the Coast to Couch webinar series. It's a new launch for us at the San Luis Obispo Coast District, and basically it features our parks, natural and cultural resources in this district. Now, in San Luis Obispo Coast District, it encompasses 40 miles of California's Central Coastline, and it includes mountainous terrain, coastal bluffs, beaches, and more. Right now, you guys are visiting Morro Bay State Park. Now, Morro Bay State Park is located on the central coast of California, and just to give you a quick background, it is one of the oldest state parks in the California park system. And to give you an idea of where it's located, I want you guys to first picture picture the United States and where California is. It is on the most western side of the U.S., and then within California, Morro Bay is located in the central area. So Morro Bay is about 4 hours north of Los Angeles and 4 hours south of San Francisco. Now, Morro Bay is home to many endangered and threatened species, and people all over the world come to visit Morro Bay for its biodiversity. And Morro Bay features significantly ecological habitats, and that's what makes it unique to this state park. And one of those ecologically significant habitats we're going to be focusing on today, and that is the estuary. So today we're going to be learning how the estuary in Morro Bay is a complex system and how it supports all of the animals and plants here. And so the first thing is, what is an estuary? Well, an estuary is when rainwater runs off the land through streams, rivers, creeks. It meets and mixes with the salty ocean. And we can kind of picture the estuary as the middle portion of a sandwich, where the land and ocean are the bread, and it influences the communities of the estuaries. Now, the land next to an estuary, so it rises above, where the water flows down into the estuary, is known as a watershed. And a watershed collects and funnels the water into a common outlet. To kind of get a better understanding of the relationship between watersheds and estuaries, we're going to be doing a quick activity. So before this program started, I kind of gave you guys a list of the materials that we'll need, and I'm going to do that again and give you guys a couple more seconds to gather those materials. So you will need a piece of paper, you'll need tape, you'll need 2 washable markers of different colors. You'll also need a spray bottle filled with water. And again, if you don't have that, you can also just fill a cup up with a little bit of water, and a hard surface. And so I'm going to take a few seconds to gather my material, and then we'll meet up and work on it. And the activity is called Crumple a Watershed. All right, so step 1, you have your piece of paper, and we're going to crumple it. Not too tightly, but just enough. And then step 2, we're going to uncrumple the piece of paper. And then we're going to tape this paper to the hard surface that you chose. For me, it's going to be the back of a whiteboard, and I'm just going to take a few seconds to tape it. All right. There we go. I have my paper that is now attached to a hard surface, and I'm going to take the time to look at it from above. So I'm going to pretend that I'm an airplane looking down at the earth or the landscape, and I'm going to look at my crinkled piece of paper from that type of view. And then I would like you guys to look at it from eye level view. So for me, it's easy to raise my piece of hard surface, but if you guys taped your piece of paper to a desk or anything like that, you might just need to lower yourself down. And you can kind of see where the paper is raised and where it dips down and makes creases in the paper. It almost looks like a topography graph, a topography map. So in that case, we're going to go on to step 3, which is I'm going to take my first washable marker. I'm choosing red, and I'm going to color the upper portions of the paper, which are going to represent mountains and ridges, or mountain ridges. So take a few seconds to do that. So there's a ridge right here, and I'm just kind of outlining it, kind of coloring down the mountain. So just kind of do that, and you can do color in more later on after the program if you feel like it. And then we're going to take a second marker of a different color, and we're going to outline the creases in the paper, and those are going to represent the potential rivers and streams. So as you can see, this part of the paper kind of dips down, so I'm going to mark it with some blue. I have some more dips over here. All right. Now we're on to step 4, and we're going to take our water source. So for me, I have a spray bottle. And if you don't have the spray bottle, I suggested using a cup and filling it up with a little bit of water. And what we're going to do is simulate rain. So for the spray bottle, I'm just going to mist my piece of paper when it's flat. And if you don't have that and you have the cup filled with water, you can just take your fingers, dip it into the water, and then flick the water onto the piece of paper. So I'm going to take some time to do that. And if you heavily spray, or if there's a lot of rainfall, you might be able to actually see water droplets run down your paper mountain and form or pool into a lake. So I'm going to kind of show you what mine looks like from down below. So as you can see, the water that I misted, so our simulated rain, went down our mountain ridges and pooled into or collected into our paper lake. And you can kind of see the water that collected. And this kind of gives us a better understanding of how our watershed affects our estuary. And you can give this some time to dry out, and you can actually see where the water flowed by looking at the color of your marker and where the color bled through the paper. So this is one that I did a few days ago, and you can kind of see, maybe it's easier to go this way, that the red mountain ridges kind of, the color went to the side of the mountains, which is what we would expect if rain falled on a mountain peak. We would expect it to run down the mountain sides into the rivers and streams and end up in a body of water. And in this case, or Morro Bay's case, into our estuary. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of how watersheds and estuaries work together, and how the water that falls out of our watershed affects the estuary. And I'm just going to give you guys a quick picture of a picture that I took on a hike that kind of gives you an overview of what the Morro Bay estuary looks like. There we go. So that's kind of the entire Morro Bay estuary. Now, the Morro Bay estuary is one of California's relatively undisturbed wetlands. And in fact, it's about 2,300 acres. Now, I know acres are kind of hard to visualize, so imagine a football field. Now, you would need over 17,000 football fields in order to fill this estuary. I think that's pretty crazy. And you can kind of see where the watershed here in Morro Bay is. And I'm going to point it out about right here where the mountains are kind of there. It's kind of difficult to see in this picture, but that's kind of where. And you can kind of see where the freshwater channels are going into the estuary. Now, this estuary provides homes for a lot of different animals and plant life, and all of these land and ocean influences help form different types of plant and animal communities. And there's about 4 different kinds. And for the first one that I'm going to mention, it is the sandspit. And I'm going to show you guys a quick picture of what a sandspit looks like here in Morro Bay State Park using a map format of our estuary. So the sandspit is located on this arrow that I'm pointing into the screen. That is the sandspit that we have here. And the sandspit is a barrier. It helps protect the estuary from the rough ocean waves. And as you can see, there is an outlet that allows seawater, I'm going to circle the outlet, that allows for seawater to continue to flow into the estuary. Now, the second type of community that we see in the estuary is salt marshes. Now, the salt marshes are actually, it's what you see behind me. I know right now it's a little bit difficult, but I'll show you a better image. And that is where it gets, the area or the land gets flooded and drained by the salt water, and it's affected by the ocean tides. The third different type of community that we would see are mudflats, and that's just big areas that are muddy. And the last but not least is the tidal channel community, and that's basically the freshwater creeks that we have here in Morro Bay. And we have two main creeks that run through this estuary, and that is the Los Osos Creek and the Churro Creek. So just before we get started and move on, this salt marsh is actually right behind me, so I'll kind of give you guys a cool scan of what it looks like. And we can actually see the sand spit from here. Change this up. So this is the Marina Boardwalk, and that sandy area that you see way in the distance of the camera, that is our sand spit. All right, so these different communities that are found in the estuary provide and support all the different animals and plants that we see here in Morro Bay, making a huge, allowing Morro Bay to be a place filled with diversity. And so how does this complex system support the different animals and plants that we see here? Well, we're going to take a dive through Morro Bay to get a better understanding of the different animal and plant life that we hear. So let's suit up, meaning we got to put on our wetsuit because the water's a little bit chilly, and our goggles. And I'm just going to give you guys a few seconds to gear up and get ready and to head underwater. So one of the first things that you would see if you were underwater in Morro Bay is the murky water. It's going to be murky and chilly, and this is a type of visual that you would actually see if you were scuba diving in Morro Bay. Now, as you can see from this picture, there's some green stuff in that in the photo. Now, what could that be? This is eelgrass, and right now we are scuba diving through the eelgrass bed. Eelgrass is a type of seagrass, and it's thin, has thin leaves, and it's usually green, but in this case there's some brown, as we can see. Now the eelgrass bed provides home for many different animals, and just a few of those I'll be showing you. So we can find some crabs in our eelbed grass, and we can find a leopard shark, possibly as we're scuba diving through the bay. And if we're super lucky, we might even be able to see a harbor seal. So now that we have spent some time in the eelgrass bed and we found out a little bit more about what eelgrass is and the different types of animals that we would see while we were scuba diving in the bay, let's go back into the surface to get a rest. Now, right when we pop out to the surface, we might see a mama sea otter with her baby. Now that would be really cool, and we do have sea otters in Morro Bay. Now, the sea otter, the mama sea otter and her baby are safe and secured in the calm waters of the bay because of the sand spit. I mentioned before that the sand spit is like a barrier, and it helps protect the estuary from the rough waves of the ocean, and that allows for new life, just like the mama sea otter and her pup. It is a nursery for these new lives. So that is one way this estuary helps support animals, is becoming a nursery. And now that we have taken our rest, we're going to swim a little bit closer to the salt marshes. So the salt marsh is behind me, but there's a body of water to the left of myself. I'm going to kind of show you. It's right before the sand spit. So that's where we're swimming to, and we're going to be looking at the salt marsh while we're swimming. Now we're going to take a rest, and we're just going to take some time to see if we can spot any wildlife. Now, Morro Bay State Park is unique in that it is a sanctuary or a safe haven for a lot of different shorebirds and seabirds. In fact, about 20,000 shorebirds come to Morro Bay every winter to rest in their migratory path, which is a pretty special thing that the estuary can provide food, shelter, and a place of rest for our resident and migratory birds. So those are some of the type of wildlife that we would see if we were looking at the salt marsh, would be the different types of birds. And just a few of those is we have a brown pelican that we might be able to see flying, or you would see your typical western gull. A lot of you guys may know them as seagulls, but the name of this bird is called a western gull. And our common bird that a lot of people would see here in the salt marsh of the estuary in Morro Bay is this little guy, which is the great blue heron. It'd be pretty neat to find one of those. So if you're ever in Morro Bay, you can keep your eye out for a great blue heron. All right. Well, thank you for taking a dive through Morro Bay with me. And now we learned a little bit how those different type of communities in the estuary, so the salt marsh, the underwater bay, the sand spit, and how those play a role in supporting different animals and plants here. So thank you again for taking that dive. And now we have a better understanding of the complex system that the estuary is and how these different communities within the estuary affect and support the animals and plant system here. Now, as we learned how unique our estuary is in Morro Bay, there's also one aspect that I didn't mention that plays a huge role in supporting and keeping the estuary healthy, and that is us. It is our actions and decisions that help keep this area healthy and preserve those communities for the different types of animals and plants. So I want you guys to just think of a few actions or decisions that you guys could do in your daily lives to help maintain this beautiful estuary. And then I'll give you guys 3 examples of what I would do if to help maintain, or what I do to help support our estuary here and the watershed that we have in Morro Bay. All right, now that you had some time to think about what you can do to help support the estuary or even your local watershed, for me, it would, and anyone, I encourage you guys to learn about your local watershed and ways of how you can support your watershed. And that includes picking up after your pets, or being aware of your water usage. So taking shorter showers or turning off the water faucet if you're in the middle of brushing your teeth. Another way would be to pick up trash after yourself, or if you see trash on a trail that you're hiking or anywhere. That's just a small type of action that can make a huge difference for the plants and animals in your local community. So again, I encourage you guys to learn more about your local watershed and ways that you can help support and preserve it. And thank you for tuning in to our Coast to Couch webinar series. This was about Morro Bay Estuary and how it's a complex system and how it supports all the different animal and plant life. We are going to continue these Coast to Couch webinars every Thursday and Saturday. So keep updated with our Facebook page at Morro Bay State Parks to see or tune in to more webinars just like this. Again, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful day and continue to stay safe and healthy during these challenging times. So thank you.